إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء، واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم، ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، فإن خير الكلام كلام الله، وأحسن الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وشر الأمور محدثاتها، وكل محدثة بدعة، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. As we continue in Usul al-Thalatha, the great Imam al-Mujaddid, al-Shaykh Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab rahimahullah, رحمة واسعة وجزاه الله عنا وعن المسلمين خير الجزاء. ونسأل الله تبارك وتعالى أن يعظم أجره ويعلي درجته وأن يدخله في فسيح جناته. As we continue, Ya Ma'ashal Ikhwa, 141 Sunday, December the 30th, 2018, which agrees with Rabi' al-Thani, the 21st, Rabi' al-Thani, Muslim Pro. Rabi' al-Thani, the 21st, 1440 after the Hijrah of Mustafa alayhi salatu wasalam. And we continue this tremendous treatise of Usul al-Thalatha, which we were discussing, which is the most tremendous treatise in which every Muslim should, if they're not able to memorize, then they should understand to the best of their ability, to try to apply it in their daily life, due to the great status not only this book has with Ahl Ilm, for the proper people of knowledge, but also preparation for death, as we know that this book was geared towards preparation for the life of the grave, and not only just for the life of the grave, but actually when it starts, from the angels asking the three questions: who are your Lord, who's your prophet, and who's your Lord, who's your prophet, and what's your religion? We stopped at the principle where it says, وَهُوَ مَعْبُودِي. If everyone would turn to their book, they say, وَهُوَ مَعْبُودِي لَيْسَ لِي مَعْبُودٌ سِوَاهُ. وَالدَّلِيلُ قَوْلُهُ تَعَالَى الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. He says that Allah Ta'ala, if you look in the actual principle, if you look in the book, the principle where we stopped at, where it says, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is my ma'bud. He's who I worship. And I do not have any ma'bud, anything of worship other than him. And the evidence and the proof of that is the first ayah in Surah Al-Fatiha, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Then the great Imam, he goes on to say, if everyone looks in their books, وَكُلُّ مَا سِوَى اللَّهِ عَالَمٌ. They say alim, as we said, alam. وَأَنَا وَاحِدٌ مِنْ ذَلِكَ الْعَالَمِ. He says, well, anything other than Allah is a alam, not a alim. Alim, scholar. Alam, created by Allah. He said, everything other than Allah is a alam. Alam, meaning it's created, or creation, from the creation. As we'll talk about, alam is a derivative of the word alama, meaning a sign. And you'll find that the sign, that a alam, or the word alama, is a sign just like alam. Because everything in the creation is a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. Everything, the creation itself is a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, as we'll talk about inshaAllah. As the author of the Salaf, what they used to say, al-ba'ra tadullu ala al-masir. Oh, excuse me. Naam, al-ba'ra tadullu ala al-masir. What's the first part of the other? No. No, alhamdulillah. Remember. It says, Al-athar yadulla ala al-masir. Wal-ba'ra tadulla ala al-ba'ir. Wal-athar yadulla ala al-masir. Wal-sama'u dhatu al-abraj. Wal-bahru dhatu al-amwaj. Wal-addu dhatu al-fijaj. Ala yadullu dharika ala al-latif al-khabir. What they used to say in a tremendous narration from the Salaf, they used to say in regards to the signs that Allah exists, they say that al-athar yadulla al-masir, meaning the tracks on the ground indicates that there was someone that walked. The tracks on the ground, or the tracks that you see, he says the indication that someone was here, that someone was walking. He says, wal-ba'ra tadulla al-ba'ir. And he said the dung from the camel, he says that clearly shows that there was a ba'ir. The dung indicates that there was a what? There was a ba'ir. He says that meaning that there was a mule, there was a cow that actually what? That made this dung. Then he said, as-sama'u dhatu al-abraj, wal-biharu dhatu al-amwaj, wal-addu dhatu al-fijaj, ala yudullu dhalika ala al-latif al-khabir. He said that the stars that you'll find that the heavens possesses the stars. So the stars are in the heavens. And the waves are in the oceans. He says in the addu dhatu al-fijaj, you'll find all the different types of hills and valleys and mountains you'll find in the lands. He says, doesn't this indicate that there's a latif al-khabir? Doesn't that indicate that there's a latif and there's a khabir? That there's one that he's courteous, tabaraka wa ta'ala, and there's a what? There's a khabir. There's one that's all aware. Meaning, saying that all these affairs is an indication from the creation that proves the existence of Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. As we know, everything in the heavens and the earth and all around us, from the human beings, from the sun during the day and the moon during the night, all of these things are called alam, or if you want to call it al-alamun, or al-alamin, or if you want to call it al-awalim. All these things that are created, you'll find that the ulama use the word alam, especially in Surah Al-Fatiha, you'll find the same exact thing. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alameen meaning the creation, because all of the creation is a sign of the existence of Allah Ta'ala. Based upon the athar that we just mentioned, بناء على الأثر الذي ذكرناه قبل قليل. So we say, يا معشر الإخوة والأخوات, you'll find that he says in his book, وكل ما سوى الله عالم وأنا واحد من ذلك العالم. He said, for verily, everything other than Allah is a alam. Meaning it's a alama, it's a sign. As we know, there's another poetry as we'll talk about inshallah. As the poet says in his poetry, he said, يا عجب كيف يعصى الإله وكيف يجحده الجاحد لكل شيء له آية تدل على أنه واحد. He says, it's amazing. يا عجب كيف يعصى الإله وكيف يجحده الجاحد لكل شيء له آية تدل على أنه واحد. You'll find that it says in the other, where he says that it's amazing. How can the one who's truly deserving of worship be disobeyed? And how can anyone who's a jahid, how is anyone a disbeliever can deny his existence? Then he goes on to say in the poetry, لِكُلِّ شَيْءٍ لَهُ آيَةٌ تَدُلُّ عَلَىٰ أَنَّهُ وَاحِدٌ. That everything has a sign. Meaning all of the creation is a sign that indicates that he is one deity. For you'll find, ya ma'ash al-ikhwah, these are from the athar, and which we'll talk about, inshallah, in the class. But we'll elaborate on this particular principle right now. It says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He is my ma'bud. Meaning He's ma'luhi or ma'budi. He is what I worship. Well, He is the one who I worship. And I do not have a ma'bud, meaning a deity of worship, other than Him, subhanahu. So this is where now we're going to what? This is where we're going to start elaborating and speaking about the lesson for today. So we say, Ya ma'ash al-ikhwa al-akhawat, if you look in now, if you look in your books, it says that Allah Ta'ala, that the great Imam, he goes on to say this principle, that I have no ma'bud, I have no deity of worship that deserves worship other than Him. You'll find, like we said in the chapter, that it says that Allah Ta'ala, I do not have a ma'bud. Why does it say that? No. I do not have a ma'bud other than Him. For verily as to show and put emphasis on what we've been speaking about for the past couple of lessons. As we all know, and we already established, we talked about this on many occasions, in many different classes. It's already proceeded, given details in this regard. And I don't think it's any need to now be repetitious and repeat what we talked about in regards to this particular matter of Allah Ta'ala establishing His rububiyyah, which necessitates and bonds upon the creation, the uluhiyyah of Allah. We don't have to speak about that. However, if you look in your book, it says, I do not have a ma'bud other than Allah. Siwahu, ghayruhu, wa hiya bima'na illallah. So, if you look in the context, if you look in your books, everyone, if you look in the actual principle, he says that Allah is my ma'bud. And I do not have a ma'bud other than Allah. You'll find that the meaning of La ilaha illallah is in that same principle. Where he says, Allah is my ma'bud. He is my ma'bud. And I do not, there's no ma'bud, there's no other one or object of worship other than Allah. You'll find if you look in your books, La ilaha illallah is exactly in that same statement. And I'm going to see if everyone can see it. La ilaha. La ilaha. None has the right to be worshipped. None has the right to be worshipped is in the statement where he says, وَهُوَ مَعْبُودِي وَلَيْسَ لِي مَعْبُودٌ سِوَى. I do not have an object of worship. That's La ilaha. If you look in your books, La ilaha is in the same statement where it says, Laysa li ma'bud. I do not have a deity of worship. The same meaning of La ilaha is in that same context. Then the great Imam goes on to say, Laysa li ma'budun siwa, other than Allah. So, illallah, except Allah, has been mentioned here in this context. So you'll find that the great Imam, in so many different ways, he says La ilaha illallah in a lot of different types, or in a lot of different contexts, where the same kalimat shahada, or the word, or the testimony of La ilaha illallah is implied. If it's not the same exact wording, but it's the same exact meaning, but with a little bit of different words, somewhat. And like you'll find, like we said, Ya ma'ash al-akhawat, if you go in the book of Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say La ilaha illallah. And then Allah also will find in different ayat, Allah saying the same thing, but with different words. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, He says, وَمَن يَكْفُرْ بِالطَّاغُوتِ وَيُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ اسْتَمْسَكَ بِالْعُرْوَةِ الْوُثْقَى لَا انْفِصَامَ لَهَا وَاللَّهُ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. Allah ta'ala, He says in His book, He says, whoever disbelieves in the Taghut and he believes in Allah, that's in Surah Al-Baqarah, the same ayat which is Ayat Al-Kursi, you'll find that Allah Ta'ala says, La ilaha illallah, but in a different type of wording. Whoever disbelieves in the Taghut, which part of the Shahada is that? Whoever disbelieves in the Taghut, that's La ilaha, and believes in Allah, illallah. So you'll find that the kalima to shahada, or the word of testimony of la ilaha illallah, is mentioned here, but the wording is slightly different. But the word and the meaning is the same. The meaning is the same, but the words are slightly different. But the meaning of la ilaha illallah is implied exactly. And you'll find that in a lot of different contexts where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings affirmation and negation and bringing the meaning of la ilaha illallah in that same meaning. So you'll find, like we said, if you look in the context, it says that Allah, I do not have a ma'bud except Him or other than Him. There's no ma'bud that I have other than Him subhanahu jalla fil ula. So Allah wa ta'ala, as we know, He has restricted worship to only Him. He has no partners in that worship. Now let's go to the ayah. If you look in your books, everyone, it speaks about Alhamdulillah. All praises are due to Allah. All praises are due to Allah. So now, as we know from the Ada, من عادة الإمام أن يذكر الدليل مع القول بعد أن يسرد ويقاعد قاعدة فإنه يأتي بالأدلة على ذلك. For you'll find that after he lays down a principle, you'll find he brings his evidence and proof from the Kitab and Sunnah. For verily, now he made his statement and he brought the principle in your book. Now he's going to bring an evidence in order to back it up. So now he uses the ayah which comes in Surah Al-Fatiha, where everyone is familiar with, where he says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praises is due to Allah. As we know, when Allah says Alhamd, so now he's talking about Surah Al-Fatiha. If we had a lot of time, we would talk about the different benefits of Surah Al-Fatiha, that if one really pondered on the meanings of it, then one would actualize Salafiyya in the best manner based upon just memorizing and understanding Surah Al-Fatiha itself. Alhamdulillah. So now he's using the evidence, which is the Surah Al-Fatiha, starting off, inaugurating by using the first ayah, Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Alhamd, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says meaning that alif wa lam tufid al-istighraq, as we know. That alif wa lam meaning that it's filling up all praise, meaning it's consuming all praise. The alhamd, all of the praise, is for Allah wa ta'ala. All of the mahamid, in a manner that's what? That's consistent in every circumstance and in every situation. As we know, Allah wa ta'ala on the day of resurrection, after the inhabitants of hell will enter the hellfire, and after the inhabitants of paradise will enter paradise, it will be said, the last thing that will be said after it's been concluded the affair, وَقِيلَ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ, which is the last ayah, which is in Surah Al-Zumar, the very last ayah. In Surah Al-Zumar, after the affair has been finalized and concluded, when everyone will take their final destiny, or they'll take their final abode, ultimately and eternally, it will be said, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So those who will be, Nasallallahu ya'afina wa iyyakum, who will receive the punishment of Allah, and those who will receive eternal bliss and pleasure and enjoyment eternally, after all those affairs are concluded, then all of the praise at the end will still be for Allah wa ta'ala. So Allah wa ta'ala has said and described that all of the praise is for Him. For number one, the praise is for Him due to two reasons. Number one is likamali sifate, due to His complete, perfect characteristics. And those characteristics are mentioned in Surah Al-Fatiha, which is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, the one who's all merciful and the one who also bestows mercy and gives him and has mercy on His creation. We'll talk about the meaning and the derivatives of Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. And the owner of the day of resurrection, and we know some narrations, the king of the day of resurrection. طيب. So Allah wa ta'ala deserves all the praise due to His perfect characteristics. because He has those characteristics that are perfect in every aspect. There's no characteristic of hearing or sight or being all knowledgeable or all aware except that Allah Ta'ala possesses those complete qualities in every aspect. Also due to the fact that Allah Ta'ala bestows His blessings and His bounties upon His servants. So number one, Allah Ta'ala has all the praise. Number one, due to His complete characteristics. Due to His complete characteristics, which is mentioned in Surah Al-Fatiha, where it says the most beneficent or the most merciful, and also the one who's the owner of the day of resurrection, which are from the characteristics of Allah Ta'ala. Also likewise, secondly, why Allah deserves all the praise, because of His perfect bounty and blessings that He bestows upon His creation and upon His servants. That's why you'll find in Surah Al-Fatiha, Allah Ta'ala commands us to say, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. To You alone we worship, and to You alone we seek Your i'ana. We seek Your help. Not only in worship, but in all of our affairs, in our lives, and in our knowledge, in taking care of our children, in every aspect of our daily affairs, we need the help of Allah Ta'ala. Not just only in affairs pertaining to worship, but in all aspects of our lives. Every aspect of our lives, we need help from Allah, and we ask Allah to guide us to what will be the best for our lives and be suitable, which will allow us to have the best outcome in this world and the hereafter. So when Allah Ta'ala says Alhamd, all the praise is for Allah. All the praise or praise, ya ma'ashal al-akhawat, as we know, it comes in the hadith upon Abu Hurairah. Well, firstly, before we get inside of Surah Al-Fatiha, we know its high status in our religion. I'm sure that everyone is familiar with, firstly, that Surah Al-Fatiha, the strongest opinion, that it's a Surah Makkiyah, that it was revealed in Mecca, and it was not revealed in Al-Madinah. That's number one. What is the qawl as-sahih, al-rajih? That the most strongest opinion is that this Surah Al-Fatiha, was Makkiyah, meaning it was revealed during the time when the Message of Allah was in Mecca, in the early part of the revelation. So which Allah subhanahu, I don't want to get too many details. So ayah in Surah Al-Fatiha is what? The ayah in Surah Al-Fatiha, Surah Al-Fatiha, is an ayah, was a surah that was revealed in the time of Mecca, in Mecca. So number one, we say that Allah Ta'ala also talks about and says that Surah Al-Fatiha is called As-Sab' al-Mathani. Sab' al-Mathani. The seven Mathani. The Sab' al-Mathani. What is Mathani? What does that mean? Mathani. So we know, of course, seven is clear. 7 ayat in the book of Allah, which is Surah Al-Fatiha. 7 ayat. But why is it called the Mathani? Mathani. You'll find that Ahl Ilm say that the meaning of Mathani, number one, is that because it's repeated so much. It's repeated so much. لأنها تثنى يعني تكرر. That it's repeated so much in all our prayers. في كل صلاة. So a person would say, what is the word Mathani? Where is that derived from in the book of Allah? How is it called the seven Mathani? That's due to another ayah, which comes in Surah Al-Hijr, ayah number 88. Allah Ta'ala talks about how the Surah Al-Fatiha, another name for it is called As-Sab' al-Mathani, which is in Surah Al-Hijr, ayah number 88. So the Quran, not the Quran, Surah Al-Fatiha is called As-Sab' al-Mathani, the 7 Mathani, which Allah Himself has said in His book in Surah Al-Hijr, وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَاكَ سَبْعًا مِنَ الْمَثَانِ وَالْقُرْآنَ الْعَظِيمِ. Verily we have given you the sab'an min al-mathani, We have given you the greatest 7, which is Mathani, and the tremendous, great, magnificent Quran. So the word Sab'ah, meaning 7, is clear. But what's the meaning of Mathani? Like we said, as Allah described, Surah Al-Fatiha being named Mathani. As we said, Mathani, number one, you'll find the Ahl Ilm say that they call it, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they call Surah Al-Fatiha Mathani because it's repeated so much. As we know, all of us recite Surah Al-Fatiha at least about 16 times a day. And every rak'ah, if a person, of course, is practicing the religion properly, of course, if he's praying off his salawat, if he's praying Surah Al-Fajr, and if he's praying Surah Al-Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and the Isha, and some of the nawafil, some of the supererogatory and voluntary prayers, you're at least reciting Surah Al-Fatiha about 15, 16 times a day. So you'll find that Surah Al-Fatiha, that's if a person is practicing correctly, of course. But if that person is practicing and doing what he's supposed to do, then it's clear as the sun in the sky why Allah Ta'ala called the Surah Al-Fatiha Sab'u Mathani, because it's repeated so much every day from so many people and so many Muslims. You'll find there's another reason why Allah Ta'ala, they say why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called it Mathani. The second meaning, Ma'ashal Akhawat, of what it contains of praise of Allah. Of what it contains of praise of Allah, of what the other different surah in the Quran does not have. I'll say it again. The second reason why it's called Mathani, of what it contains of praise of Allah, of what other surah do not contain of that praise of Allah Ta'ala. But Surah Al-Fatiha contains the greatest praise of Him Subhanahu Jalla fil Ula. To the point, as we know, that no salah is valid without Surah Al-Fatiha. One cannot recite a surah of the other surah in the Quran which you recite, your salah will be what? Invalid if you do not recite what? Surah Al-Fatiha. No, if a person now stood up in a salah and he didn't recite Surah Al-Fatiha, let's just say he recites Surah Al-Baqarah from beginning to the end in one rak'ah, his salah is still invalid. Why? Because he did not recite what? Surah Al-Fatiha. So both meanings is the meaning of the word Mathani. Mathani, ya ma'ashal akhawat. We said the first meaning is because it's either repeated, it's repeated so much daily. تكرر في كل صلاة بحيث إذا لم تقرأ في أي ركعة من ركعات الصلاة سواء إن كان الصلاة فرضا أو نفلا فإن تلك الصلاة باطلة. As we know the hadith of the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم من لم يقرأ بفاتحة الكتاب فهي خداج وكررها النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم 3 مرات. Whoever does not recite Surah Al-Fatiha, then his salah is khidaj, meaning it's incomplete. طيب, as far as the basmala, I'll talk about that a little bit later because I have some details in it. As far as in regards to Surah Al-Fatiha from the great high status it has in our religion, as we know, of what comes in the Hadith al-Qudsi, where the Prophet ﷺ said on the authority of Abu Hurairah that Allah says that he heard the message of Allah say that Allah says, he says that Allah Ta'ala says, قَسَمْتُ الصَّلَاةَ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ عَبْدِي نِصْفَيْنِ, that I have now broken down the salah between me and my servant 2 parts. So if my slave says Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, then Allah Ta'ala says that my servant Hamidani Rabbi, Hamidani Abdi, that my servant has made hamd upon me. If he says Ar-Rahman Rahim, Allah says Athna alayya abdi. Athna or thana is on a higher level than hamd. Thana. Thana meaning that not only has my slave praised me, but he is at the same time glorified me. Then he says, Majjadani abdi. Then he says in the third, if he says, Maliki yawmiddin, Majjadani abdi. That my Lord now, my slave or my servant now has made tamjeed. That he has now magnified me and praised me and glorified me. So each time, when a person recites Surah Al-Fatiha, each time you recite one ayat to another ayat, the praise of Allah is going higher and higher and higher. So not only do you, when a person says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, it says, Hamidani Abdi. My slave or my servant has made hamd of me. Then he says another time, he says, Rahman Rahim, says, Athna alayya abdi. He's taking it up a notch, taking it up another level. Where not only has he praised me, he has what? Glorified me. Then he says, Maliki yawmiddin, meaning the owner of the day of resurrection. Then you go up another notch, Majjadani abdi. So not only has he what? Praised me, he's glorified me, he's magnified me on all those levels. Then he says, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een, to Allah wa ta'ala. After that praise, Allah wa ta'ala said, this is between me and my servant, and for my servant what he asked for. And if he says to the end, making dua, Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim, to the end of the ayat, Allah wa ta'ala says, this is for my servant, and for my servant what he asked for. So we say, Ya ma'ash al-ikhwa, this is to show the high status of Surah Al-Fatiha. That the high status that it possesses, as we know, based upon the fact that no salah is valid except with reading it. And if one was to not read Surah Al-Fatiha, it's clear when we know and say that the surah, one salah is invalid. So why do we say that this surah is the greatest of those surah, of what it contains of praise? And why is this surah so great? And if a person truly understood the fiqh of it, they will now what? They will now understand. In which we'll talk a little bit about it, inshallah, right now. For firstly, number one, that Surah Al-Fatiha is from those surah in the Quran that has been singled out with only Tawheed. As we know, the whole Quran is a Tawheed, of course. What do I mean by this? What I mean that there's nothing else mentioned in that surah except which is focusing on the categories and the affairs of Tawheed only. Meaning in other surah, you'll find that Allah, for example, mentions ahkam, about leaving off, for example, zina, or leaving off drinking intoxicants, or leaving off gambling, or for example, different types of ahkam of staying away from eating pig meat, or it's permissible to marry those right-hand possession or marry a certain women and establish the salat to the end of it. But however, Surah Al-Fatiha is from those surah in the Quran that's been singled out for speaking about the affair of Tawheed, and that's it. As we know, there are surah in the Quran that has been singled out with speaking about the affairs of Tawheed only. Those four surah are number one, Surah Al-Fatiha. I hope you write this down and not eating potato chips. Surah Al-Fatiha is number one. Number two is Surah Al-Kafirun. Number three is Surah Al-Ikhlas and Surah Al-Falaq. Surah Al-Fatiha is singled out with talking about Tawheed, all of it. Likewise, Surah Al-Kafirun, also likewise. We'll talk about that later. For each one, we will have to break down and make a separate topic on. But for now, we're talking about Surah Al-Fatiha. So we know that now, as it comes in the Muqaddimah, of which is the first surah, Surah Al-Fatiha, that one opens and inaugurates all of his ibadah, especially the ibadah of the salah, with this particular surah. So Tawheed, as we know, monotheism is the foundation. It's number one. طيب. So number one, Surah Al-Fatiha, is, you'll find that it's been what? Singled out with the affair of Tawheed only. Number one. Number two, Surah Al-Fatiha, it also contains what they call a targheeb, meaning the promise of Allah, tabarak wa ta'ala, of the good of which He will bestow upon those who stick and cling to this one path, meaning the reward and the promise He's going to give. So that's number two, why Surah Al-Fatiha is considered the greatest surah of the Quran. Number one, as I said, I'll say it again. Number one, it's been singled out of monotheism. It's number one. Number two, what it contains of a targheeb, of al-wa'ad, meaning what Allah has promised for those who actualize His worship and cling to its path and stick to it. Number three, what this surah contains of a targheeb, of a warning, of warnings, which is also a branch of foundation, as we'll talk about inshallah. It's a branch of the foundations of the religion, as we'll talk about. So this surah contains all three of these affairs. This surah contains all three of what we're going to mention in a couple of minutes, also likewise of the other benefits. طيب. As you'll find that Allah Ta'ala, His sunnah, has gone forth, as we know in His book, where you'll find in a lot of ayat, rather the whole book of Allah is geared towards the tawheed of Allah and the promise to those who obey and carry out the commands and carry out iman, what they will receive of reward, and likewise the opposite effect, which is those who now leave off these affairs, which they will what? They will receive that punishment and that retribution. May Allah Ta'ala protect us. So three of those affairs, keep in mind. Number one, Surah Al-Fatiha contains of monotheism, all of it from beginning to end. Number two, what it contains of what? Wa'ad, of what Allah has what? Promised. For those who actualize His worship, that they believe in His existence, actualize His worship, and they cling to His path that He has made for them. And also the warning for those who what? Deviate from that, who do not worship Him alone, who do not believe in Him, and who also, what will be their final abode, and what will be the final outcome and the result of those who what? Go outside of that. So we know that Allah Ta'ala all throughout His book has gathered between these two matters, a targheeb with tarheeb, of what He's promised and what He's warned against, which opens our chest for this monotheism, which is the Surah Al-Fatiha. طيب. When Allah Ta'ala mentions all the categories of Tawheed, which is in Surah Al-Fatiha, all the categories of Tawheed has been mentioned in Surah Al-Fatiha, all three of them. After Allah mentions all three categories of Tawheed, then He follows it up with His promise of what He will give a reward. Then Allah follows it up after of warning of a punishment for those who went outside of that. Because we know that the promise will be for those who agree with this tawheed, with this monotheism, meaning the reward. And the warning and the fear of His punishment will be instilled against those who have opposed this tawheed. And every person is on a certain level according to what? His or her faith. And also likewise to their deeds and how much they have purified their monotheism. As we know, there are people out there that have nullified it. There are people out there that rejected it. And there are people out there that do not believe in it. And there are people out there that do believe in it. But however, they do certain acts that taint it or render it weak or make it incomplete. So that's a lot of levels of people. There's levels of people, like we said, that reject it. And there are people out there that are what? That do not believe in it. And there are people out there, like we said, that might openly profess to it, but inwardly they disbelieve in it. But then you have people who do believe in it, And they profess to it, but however they commit acts that might what? Render it incomplete. So these are the three affairs that I wanted to stick to. Don't go outside of these three things that we're mentioning, everyone. That Surah Al-Fatiha, number one, has been singled out with the monotheism of Allah from beginning to end, because Surah Al-Fatiha contains all three categories of Tawheed. All three categories. And also what's followed up after Allah Ta'ala lays down that foundation with a targheeb, with tarheeb. With what? With promising the reward for those who cling to this Tawheed, and those who will receive retribution, and those who receive punishment for those who oppose it and reject it, and what have you. طيب. As we know, the Quran, as we know, and I'm going to say this. Oh man, I don't know, this is going to get confusing. I'm going to kick through this right now. That's going to be confusing somewhat. Matter of fact, we could go into this. طيب. The Quran, as we know, and I want everyone to write this down. The Quran, as we know, contains or comprises of على أمور أكثر من ثلاثة, that it contains certain affairs, or it comprises of certain affairs. As it comes in the poetry, حلال حرام محكم متشابه بشير نذير قصة عظة مثل. Number one, that the Quran, that it comprises of these affairs. Number one, write this down. Halalun haram. That's clear. What's lawful, what's unlawful. Muhkamun mutashabihun. Muhkam. What's muhkam? Meaning, muhkam means in the Quran, or the meaning of muhkam is that as soon as you hear the meaning, it's clear. It's clear. Meaning the meaning is clear as soon as you hear it. It's muhkam. Mutashabih, meaning that one has to attain another text to know its proper meaning. Meaning there's another text that clarifies its meaning. Because we don't want to say that mutashabih, some people translate it as it's unclear. There's nothing in the Quran that's unclear. Mutashabih means there's another text that clarifies its meaning so it can be understood properly. That's the meaning of mutashabih. And also mutashabih, as we'll discuss, inshallah, meaning that the meaning is clear, but the kayfiyah of how it is not known. That's also the meaning of mutashabih. I'll say it again. Mutashabihun means that another text explains it and clarifies its meaning so it can be understood properly. That's one meaning of mutashabih. The second meaning of mutashabihun is that the meaning is understood, but the kayfiyah of how it is not known to us. Such as the characteristics of Allah. The meaning is known. When you hear Allah's all hearing, all seeing, one understands that. It's clear. The meaning is clear. But how does Allah hear? Or how is Allah's face? Or how did Allah rise above the arsh? These affairs, the kayfiyah of how it is beyond our comprehension. The kayfiyah of it is not known. For example, that is from the affairs of that which is the meaning of mutashabih. Meaning the meaning is known. The meaning is known. But the kayfiyah is not known. But what I want to say also, brothers and sisters, let me clarify this because I don't want no one to get this confused. The characteristics of Allah Ta'ala is from the affairs of what is muhkam. I want to clarify this because I don't want nobody to carry out the wrong meaning, because this is important. The affairs of the sifat and the asma of Allah is from the affairs which are muhkam, not mutashabih. I want to clarify that. I'll say this again. The affairs of the characteristics of Allah, His names, His attributes are muhkam, meaning they're clear as far as its meaning. They're clear as far as its meaning. But the kayfiyah of how it is from those affairs that are what? That they say that is mutashabih, meaning that no one knows them. But all the affairs of the sifat of Allah is from the aspect of it being muhkam, meaning as soon as you hear the meaning, it's clear. Allah is all wise, clear. As soon as one hears, Allah is all wise. Allah is all knowledgeable, clear. Allah is all hearing, clear. Allah sees everything, clear. How Allah has a face, clear. How's Allah's face? Allahu A'lam. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? So the book of Allah contains halalun, haramun, muhkamun, mutashabih, bashirun, nadhirun, qissatun, idhatun, mathal. That the Quran, it contains halal, haram, that's clear. Muhkam, we already just explained the meaning of muhkam. Mutashabih, we just explained the meaning of mutashabih. Bashirun, nadhir, giving glad tidings and warnings. Qissatun, idhatun, mathal. The qissa, stories. Idhatun, exhortations. And the mathal, and examples. Now, I'm going to sum all this up. Now, I'm going to bring everything together. A couple of minutes ago, then we discussed that Surah Al-Fatiha, right, everyone? It contains 3 affairs. What's the first one, everyone? Tawheed. Second one is what? Targheeb, or wa'd, the promise of Allah, of what He's given of paradise and reward. Third is what? Third is targheeb, of warning. Tayyib. Now we mention something else. We said halal, haram, muhkam, mutashabih, bashirun, nadhirun, qissatun, idhatun, mathal. As it comes to the poetry. Halal, haram, muhkam, mutashabih, bashirun, nadhirun, idhatun, qissatun, idhatun, mathal. All those 9 things that I mentioned, which is lawful, unlawful, muhkam. I said the meaning of muhkam, mutashabih. That's 4. Bashir, glad tidings. Nadir, warnings. Qissatun, stories that are true, that happen. Idhatun, exhortations. Mathal, striking examples. So that's how many? 1, 2, that's 4. 9 affairs. All those 9 things that I mentioned go back to those 3 affairs. All 9 of them go back to those 3 things that I mentioned in Surah Al-Fatiha. How is that, everyone? For example, halal and haram is from which category, everyone, of those 3 things, those 3 categories that I just mentioned? Halal goes back to what? Goes back to what? Of promise and reward. For a person that sticks to what's halal, he will what? Get a what? He'll get a reward. For the person that sticks and does haram, then he'll get a what? Get a punishment. So it goes back to those what? Those 2 affairs. Tayyib. Also likewise, let's get back into muhkam. Word muhkam and mutashabih. Also likewise plays a part in those 3 affairs that we said is mentioned in Surah Al-Fatiha. The word muhkam, as we talked about and said, meaning it's clear. It doesn't accept one meaning. Muhkam goes back to what? Goes back to the promise and the reward of Allah. If the affairs in those who are upon was correct, if they do what's correct in this world as far as in their belief system, Meaning, if they cling to what is clear and they follow what is clear, they will receive a reward. So it goes back to number 2 again, for those 3 affairs we mentioned, from reward. However, mutashabih, Allah gives a warning. Allah gives a warning for mutashabih. Why? Because we said that mutashabih, and the ayah, it can now what? It can carry different meanings. Mutashabih can carry different meanings. If you read a verse, a person would think, oh, it means this, no, it means this, or it means this. As we know, all of those different meanings are incorrect. Of course, if it opposes Kitab and Sunnah, and they're only meanings that are correct based upon what the Sahaba mentioned, what the Prophet ﷺ explained, or what Allah explained. Mutashabih can, number 1, can mean different meanings. That's why you'll find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in His book, if you go back to the ayah, which is in Surah An-Nisa, if you go back to Surah Ali Imran, ayah number... Okay. تفضل. If you go back to Surah Ali Imran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Ali Imran, ayat number 7. I think he's about to call you then. He says, منه آيات محكمات هن الكتاب. Nadir is up. He called it? He's got to call it now. Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar. La ilaha illallah. أشهد أن محمد أشهد أن محمد رسول الله. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آتي محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وبعث مقام محمود الذي وعدته. طيب. We got like 10 minutes, I think. 10 minutes. طيب. So number 1, we said that halal and haram goes back to those 2 matters that we mentioned, either reward or punishment. Similar to that, muhkam wa mutashabih. Muhkam wa mutashabih. Muhkam, as we said, the meaning of it is that the ayah in the Quran does not accept لا تحتمل إلا معنى واحد. That the meaning of muhkam means it does not carry except one meaning. It does not carry except one meaning. As soon as you hear it, it's clear. For example, Surah Al-Ikhlas, when Allah says, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ اللَّهُ الصَّمَدُ لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. That'll say Allah is one, clear. Allah is Samad, clear. لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ. Allah was not born, nor does He give birth, clear. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. There's nothing similar to Him, He's one. There's nothing as alike to Him, clear. So that's what? Muhkam. That's muhkam. So for the mu'mineen and the salafiyin wa ahl hadith, if they cling to those path of following what's muhkam, they will be what? Rewarded. Due to the ayat which comes to Surah Al-Imran, where Allah Ta'ala says, number 7, Surah Al-Imran, ayat number 7. What does Allah say, everyone? منه آيات محكمات هن الكتاب وأخر متشابهات فأما الذي يتبعون التشابه منه ابتغاء الفتنة وابتغاء تأويله فأما الذين اتبعوا ما تشابه منه حمد الله فأما الذي اتبعوا ما تشابه منه ابتغاء الفتنة وابتغاء تأويله وما يعلم تأويله إلا الله والراسخون في العلم. As we know the ayat, listen to what Allah says in His book. He says, in the book of Allah are ayat that are muhkamat. They are the mother of the book. And there are others that are mutashabihat. For as for those who follows what is mutashabih, meaning for those who follow what is mutashabih, meaning we said that the meaning of mutashabih, number one, it contains more than one meaning of those ayat. Some of those meanings are correct. Some of those meanings are correct. And some of those meanings are incorrect. As we know, if you'll find ayat in the book of Allah that covers numerous meanings, they are all correct. And there are other meanings that certain people would extract which are incorrect and rejected if it opposes what Allah says and or the messengers say or the Sahaba of how they explain the verses. But there's certain ayat in the book of Allah that when you read it, it needs details. It needs details so you can understand it properly. What's an example of that? There's a lot of examples. From the examples of what I said in the classic Kitab al-Tawheed, for example. If you read the ayat, and I was talking about this the other night, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in His book about Isa, He said that Isa was the word of Allah that was cast into Maryam, and he was a spirit from him. He was a spirit from him. The verse, if you look, sisters, if you look in this verse, which is in Surah An-Nisa, ayah number 171, when Allah Ta'ala says in His book that the word that He casted into Maryam and he's a spirit from him. Spirit from him, is that muhkam or is that mutashabih? Meaning it's mutashabih because now it needs another text to clarify what it means. Spirit from him. Ma'na kawniha mutashabiha. Meaning the word min. Now listen. So Allah Ta'ala says, for those who follow what is mutashabih, they follow it to seek fitna, cause confusion, and also seek its what? Its misinterpretation. No one knows the interpretation except Allah and those who are well grounded in knowledge. Now I'm going to give an example of this. Now where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says those who follow is mutashabih, they follow it in order to cause fitna and cause confusion. The example of this comes back to this ayah. Now keep this in your mind. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, spirit from him. So now, spirit from him, based upon what you see, it can mean a lot of meanings. Spirit from him. Number one, from him, as we know in the Arabic language, linguistically, can carry three meanings. Number one, min can mean ibtida'iyah, meaning it started from Allah. Min, or the word min meaning from. Min can, from the meanings of it, is ibtida'iyah, meaning it started from Allah. Meaning the spirit that it started from Allah. Meaning it started from Allah, that Allah created it, and it originally came from the creation of Allah. From what Allah created. So that's number one, the first meaning of from him, based upon this ayah. Number two, the word min, as we know in the Arabic language, min can mean what? Tab'idiyya, meaning a part of something, meaning it broke off. Right? Number three, min or from in the Arabic language can also be bayaniya, for clarification. طيب. So now, as we know, everything that's mutashabih in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brings a text clarifying its meaning so it can be understood properly. So what's the meaning of from him in this ayah? What's the meaning of it? Is it the first? Meaning it started from Allah, meaning Allah created it firstly, then put it in Maryam? Or does it mean it's a part of Allah? Or does it mean min for clarification? Of course, a person who's upon the correct path would say it's the first. It's the first, meaning it started from Allah, meaning the spirit originally was created by Allah. And it's Allah, it originally came from Allah, meaning Allah created it. And He instilled it in Maryam, in the womb of Maryam. Those who want fitna, they will say no, min means the second, meaning it's a part that was broken off. So a person would say, well, what's your evidence to say that it means the first meaning? What's the dalil? What's your evidence? You have to have evidence. What's your evidence now that it means ibtida'iyah? Or it means something that has attained high status of what they call tashrif. Why? Now look into the book of Allah and another ayah. So there's another ayah that explains the meaning of the word minhum. There's another ayah that clarifies its meaning. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this book, which is in Surah Al-Imran, in ayah number 59, and Surah Al-Zukhruf, ayah number 59. Allah wa ta'ala says, Inna mathala Isa inda Allah ka mathali Adam, khalaqahu min turab, thumma qala lahu kun fayakun. So Allah wa ta'ala. So now, we know from the methodology, and I want everyone to understand this, the methodology of mutashabih, that we return it back to what is muhkam. Al-mutashabih yuraddu ila al-muhkam. The mutashabih is referred back to the muhkam, meaning those ayat or those texts that clarify its meaning to make it clear. So what's the ayat that makes this text clear? There's an ayat where Allah says, verily the example of Isa with Allah is like the example of Adam. He created him from dirt. Then He said to him, be, and he is. So it's to let you know that Allah Ta'ala is clarifying and making clear in these ayat that Jesus, the son of Mary, is not a part of Allah that was broken off. He was not a part of Allah that was broken off. So the meaning of mutashabih here, meaning that what is mutashabih of what the people who want fitna, they would seek, they say no, it means Allah, that Jesus was a part of Allah, like how the Christians believe. Ahlul Sunnah say no. We take the ayat that Isa, meaning the spirit, is from Allah. Meaning it the first is the what? The first meaning of the word min, meaning it started from Allah. Meaning Allah created the spirit, and He's not a part of Allah, or He was broken off for Allah. Rather, Jesus was just a mere spirit that Allah created by the word be, and He became. That's it. So that we take that which is mutashabih and we return it back to that which is muhkam. Meaning in those other ayats or those other verses or those other texts that clarify its meaning so it can be understood properly. So you'll find that the other texts in the book of Allah explain the meaning of this text, which is in what? Surah An-Nisa. So the ayat, you'll find it. So that's the meaning of mutashabih. Meaning there are other texts that will clarify its meaning so it can be understood properly. Because if a person was to read it, they would take different meanings until shaitan would inspire one with the improper meaning, which he will now believe something that is what? False. And that which is what? Incorrect, which will affect his belief system. So now, how is this now connected with the three affairs of Surah Al-Fatiha? How do we take that back to it, everyone? Because those who follow mutashabih will be from those who will what? end up with a punishment. Meaning those who don't have the proper methodology of mutashabih, meaning they take the ayats, extract it to mean false meanings, meanings that are falsely and that are incorrect, and they follow that, which will be their result is they will receive a punishment. In contrast to those, if they take that which is mutashabih and they have the proper methodology and they take it back to that which is muhkam, they will receive a reward. So you find ultimately muhkam and mutashabih still falls under the category of what, everyone? Wa'id and wa'id. Still falls under the category of those that they follow what is muhkam, they'll receive a reward, and those who follow what's mutashabih, meaning the improper meanings, and they also follow that, and they base their religion based upon what's incorrect and the incorrect understanding of those verses, they will receive a punishment. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? Or does it need to be explained again? I'll say it one more time, and I'll just sum it up. Those who follow which is muhkam, they'll receive a reward. Those who follow mutashabih, mean the improper meaning of for those verses that are mutashabih, those who follow the mutashabih, for what is the improper interpretation and understanding of those verses, they will receive a punishment. And we know, brothers and sisters, that every deviant sect from the Muslims all have their portion of following what is mutashabih, meaning following ayats and verses that are what? Misinterpreted, and not return back to what is clear, where you'll find there are other texts in the Kitab and Sunnah that clarifies its meaning, but they don't follow it. Rather, they follow what is what? What suits their lusts and desires, so they can cause fitna and confusion. There's no deviant sect from the deviant sects that there are, except that they have their portion of following, which is mutashabih. And you'll find that Allah clearly says in His book, which is in Surah Surah Ali Imran, number 7, He says, those who follow what is mutashabih, they follow it to cause fitna and to misinterpret it. To misinterpret the verses, meaning that they don't return back to those ayat or those other verses that clarify its meaning so it can be understood properly. They don't want to follow that. We're not going to follow the other ayats that clarify it, or the text and the ahadith that's authentic that clarifies the meaning. No, we want to follow what? Follows our lusts and agrees with our lusts and desires, like what the Christians did. The Christians took those verses, they took the false interpretation of it until they ran with it and they fell into falsehood, and they fell into those who are what? Who have now deviated. And fell into what? Not only deviated, but it raised them to the level where it even what? Took them outside the fold of Iman. Whereas from the example of that is the example I gave in this verse where Allah says in His book, spirit from Him. They extracted from that a false interpretation. They said that the meaning of spirit from Allah, meaning that which was a spirit that was broken off from Allah, that was broken off, that's the reason why Jesus is a part of God and God is a part of Jesus, and they're all broken up into parts. They extracted that evil verse and interpretation, followed it until they fell into what? Something of falsehood, till they deviated. Until now they will receive a punishment from Allah based upon this type of methodology. In contrast to what? Ahlul Sunnah. They cling to what is what? The proper methodology in that which is pertaining to mutashabih. Meaning when they said spirit from Him, they looked in the book of Allah to find what is the proper meaning of it. Or looked in the Sunnah. Or looked in the statements of the Sahaba. What is the meaning of the meaning spirit from Him? They found a verse that says where Allah clarifies it in another ayah, saying that the meaning of from Him, meaning a spirit that started from Allah creating it first. Allah created it, then He wanted to show something special about it, then He wanted to show His perfect ability by creating it without a father and instilled it in the womb of what? Maryam. Is it clear what I'm saying, everyone? Or not? Is it clear? J. I'll stick with that. I'll stick with here. So you find, and I'm showing this to everyone to show the importance of knowledge. So you see the importance of knowledge how? Well, knowledge is your weapon against all this deviance out here. If you have knowledge, you're well grounded in this, you will have the barrier to protect you from any type of nonsense out here. And you see in this lesson that I'm making it clear to show how important knowledge is. Is it clear or is it not clear? J. So we keep and then keep a text and keep a tag or keep a check mark on Surah Al-Fatiha. Everything goes back to those three affairs, which is number one, Tawheed. Number two, which was what? Wa'd. And the second was Wa'id. Or you want to call it Targheeb with Tarheeb. And everything returns back to those three matters. Everything. And we'll stop here, inshallah. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك. أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Any questions about the lesson?